The scent of pine and wildflowers permeated the great hall, a desperate attempt to mask the underlying musk of dozens of werewolves gathered for the seasonal council. I shifted uncomfortably on the hard wooden bench, tucked away in the corner where I hoped to remain unnoticed. The ceiling soared high above us, wooden beams crisscrossing like the branches of ancient trees, casting long shadows across faces that refused to meet my gaze. I was the only human in a room full of predators. My fingers absently traced the silver bracelet at my wrist, my grandmother's final gift before she passed. "For courage," she had whispered, clasping it around my thin arm. "Sometimes the strongest power is in standing still when others expect you to run." The delicate chain links caught the light from the massive fireplace, sending tiny reflections dancing across my pale skin. 3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have imagined being here. 3 weeks ago, I was just Elena, a research assistant documenting folklore in remote mountain villages. Then I stumbled upon this hidden community, or rather they found me wandering too close to their territory during a full moon. Instead of the death I expected, they brought me here to determine my fate. The Alpha King hadn't arrived yet. Neither had his advisors. Just lower-ranking pack members and their families, stealing glances at me when they thought I wasn't looking. Their whispers carried clearly to my human ears, despite their attempts at discretion. Why keep her alive at all? She knows too much. Humans bring nothing but destruction. I swallowed hard, forcing my breathing to remain steady. My blonde hair fell forward, creating a curtain between me and their judgment. Over the past weeks, I'd learned that showing fear only made things worse. Predators could smell it, literally. And nothing excited them more than frightened prey. The massive doors at the end of the hall swung open with a groan of ancient hinges, and the room fell into immediate silence. I looked up, my heart thundering against my ribs as the crowd parted. He didn't walk so much as prowl. Even in human form, there was nothing remotely civilized about Alexander Blackthorn. The Alpha King stood at least a foot taller than the tallest man in the room, his shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. His hair, as black as midnight, was pulled back from a face that might have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and unforgiving lines. A jagged scar ran from his right temple to his jaw, a testament to battles won and enemies vanquished. Behind him trotted a small gray wolf pup, barely the size of a large house cat. The contrast between the massive alpha and the tiny creature following at his heels would have been comical if everyone hadn't looked so terrified. "The council will begin." His voice rolled like distant thunder across the hall, requiring no elevation to command absolute attention. "Bring forward the human." My keeper, a beta wolf named Orion who'd been assigned to guard me since my arrival, gently touched my elbow. His eyes held a warning. Be respectful, be calm, say nothing unless directly addressed. I stood on legs that felt like water, willing them not to buckle as I walked the impossibly long path to the center of the hall. The Alpha's eyes found mine, green as the deepest forest, ringed with gold that seemed to glow in the firelight. Something flickered in them when they met mine. Surprise? Curiosity? Whatever it was vanished behind a wall of cold calculation. "You were found on pack lands during the blood moon. You've seen what humans are not permitted to see." His voice was lower now, meant for me rather than the crowd, yet no less intimidating. "The traditional punishment is death." The hall remained deathly silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. "However," he continued, "Orion tells me you've made no attempt to escape, that you've shown unusual composure for a human in your situation." I remained silent, unsure if I was expected to respond. My grandmother's bracelet felt suddenly warm against my skin, reminding me of her words. "Stand still when others expect you to run." "Have you nothing to say in your defense?" he asked, a dangerous edge to his question. I lifted my chin slightly. "I understand your laws exist to protect your people. I don't blame you for enforcing them." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Alpha's expression remained unchanged, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle relaxation of his shoulders that only someone watching carefully would notice. While the Alpha considered me, I became aware of movement near his feet. The little gray pup had ventured closer, nose twitching as it caught my unfamiliar scent. Before anyone could stop it, the pup bounded forward, surprising me by grabbing the sleeve of my sweater between tiny teeth and tugging playfully. The room fell silent in horror. Even I knew enough about pack hierarchy to understand that the alpha's pup, likely his heir or a child of significant standing, should never interact with a human prisoner. The pup continued tugging, growling softly in what was clearly an invitation to play, oblivious to the tension filling the room. Every instinct screamed to pull away, to apologize, to show appropriate fear. Instead, my grandmother's voice echoed in my head. Sometimes strength comes from standing still. I met the alpha's gaze directly, and slowly, deliberately, tugged back on my sleeve, smiling gently at the pup. Time seemed to stop. Alexander's expression darkened for a heartbeat, and I was certain I'd made a fatal error. Then, inexplicably, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something that broke the perfect mask of indifference. "Interesting," he murmured, so quietly I barely heard it. Then louder. "The human will remain under guard while the council deliberates her fate. She is not to be harmed." He snapped his fingers once, and the pup reluctantly released my sleeve, trotting back to his side. As Orion led me back to my seat, I could feel Alexander's eyes following me. Something had changed in that moment. Some invisible current had shifted, but I couldn't begin to understand what or why. The council meeting proceeded, addressing territory disputes and resource allocations that seemed trivial compared to the question of my continued existence. I sat quietly, observing the dynamics of the pack. Alexander ruled absolutely, that much was clear. When he spoke, others lowered their eyes. When he asked questions, answers came immediately, delivered with deference bordering on reverence. But there was something else beneath the surface. A tension that suggested not everyone was content with his leadership. An older wolf with silver streaking his temples frequently exchanged glances with a small group seated near the side entrance. When they thought the alpha was engaged elsewhere, their expressions betrayed calculation, even resentment. I filed this observation away, unsure if it would matter, but unwilling to overlook any detail that might help me navigate this dangerous new world. As the meeting concluded, Orion appeared at my side. "You've been summoned," he said quietly, nodding toward a side door where Alexander had just disappeared. "The Alpha wishes to speak with you privately." My heart resumed its frantic pace. "Is that normal?" Orion's expression was unreadable. "Nothing about this situation is normal. A human hasn't been brought before the council in over 50 years. He hesitated. "The pup that approached you, Luna, she's the Alpha's daughter. She's never shown interest in any stranger before, wolf or human." He led me through winding corridors of the lodge-like structure that served as the pack's central meeting place. The walls were lined with ancient-looking weapons and paintings depicting wolves running beneath full moons. We stopped before a heavy wooden door carved with intricate pack symbols. "Wait here," Orion instructed, knocking once before disappearing inside. Left alone in the hallway, I considered running. The exit wasn't far, and in the confusion following the council meeting, I might make it to the trees before anyone noticed. But where would I go? I knew nothing about surviving in these mountains, and I'd seen how fast werewolves could move when motivated. Besides, something about the pup's interest in me and Alexander's reaction had kindled a dangerous spark of hope. The door swung open, and Orion motioned me inside. "Remember," he whispered as I passed, "show respect, but not fear." The room was smaller than I expected, warm from a crackling fire in a stone hearth. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes whose spines bore titles in languages I couldn't identify. Alexander stood with his back to me, staring out a window that overlooked the forested valley below. The little gray pup, Luna, was curled on a rug near the fire, her ears perking up as I entered. "You're either very brave or very foolish," Alexander said without turning. "Most humans would have cowered when approached by a werewolf, even one so small. She's beautiful," I said honestly. "And she didn't seem threatening." He turned then, studying me with those unnerving green-gold eyes. "Luna is my daughter. Her mother died giving birth to her 6 months ago. Since then, she's refused to interact with anyone but me." He took a step closer. "Until today." I remained still, though every nerve ending urged me to retreat. I'm sorry about her mother. Something flickered across his face. Pain, quickly masked. Your scent is unusual, not like other humans I've encountered. Is that why I'm still alive? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Partly. You've also shown unusual courage for someone in your position. He moved to a desk and picked up a folder. Elena Morgan, 26 years old, anthropology researcher specializing in folklore and mythology. No living family. No one likely to come looking for you. My blood ran cold. They'd investigated me thoroughly. Your work on regional myths about shapeshifters was what brought you to these mountains, he continued. Ironic that you should find exactly what you were looking for. Not exactly, I countered. The legends I was researching described werewolves as mindless beasts, savage killers who lost all humanity during transformation. I met his gaze steadily. That's clearly not accurate. He arched an eyebrow. You sound disappointed. Intrigued, I corrected. The reality is far more complex and fascinating than the myths. Alexander studied me for a long moment, then set the folder down. The council is divided on what to do with you. Some want you eliminated to protect our secret. Others suggest memory alteration, a difficult and dangerous process for humans. And what do you want? I asked softly. Before he could answer, Luna patted over and nudged my hand with her nose. Without thinking, I knelt and gently scratched behind her ears. She made a sound somewhere between a purr and a growl, leaning into my touch. Alexander watched this interaction with an expression I couldn't decipher. That, he said finally, is what intrigues me. Luna has rejected every potential caregiver since her mother's death. She refuses to bond with anyone in the pack. He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture of frustration. Yet she approaches you without hesitation. I continued petting the little wolf, who had now rolled onto her back, exposing her belly in a display of trust that seemed to shock Alexander even more than her initial approach. I'm offering you a choice, Elena Morgan, he said, his voice taking on a formal quality. Death, memory alteration with all its risks, or service to the pack as Luna's caretaker until we determine a more permanent solution. My hand stilled on Luna's fur. You would trust your daughter with a human stranger? Trust has nothing to do with it, he replied coldly. You will remain under guard at all times. Any attempt to escape or contact the outside world will result in immediate execution. But Luna needs care from someone she accepts, and for whatever reason, that appears to be you. It wasn't a choice at all, really, but something about the tiny wolf pup looking up at me with absolute trust made the decision feel significant beyond mere survival. I accept, I said, feeling as though I'd just signed away my future with those two simple words. Alexander nodded once, sharply. Orion will show you to quarters near mine, so Luna can access you easily. Your duties begin immediately. As Orion led me from the room, I glanced back to see Alexander kneeling beside his daughter, who was watching me leave with what I could have sworn was a wolfish smile. I had survived the council, but instinct told me the true challenges were only beginning. Whatever had drawn Luna to me remained a mystery, one that might save my life or end it, depending on what secrets it ultimately revealed. Dawn broke with a gentle persistence that belied the strangeness of my circumstances. I awoke to tiny paws pressing against my chest, and a small wet nose investigating my face. Luna had somehow managed to slip into my quarters during the night, despite Orion's assurance that the adjoining door to the Alpha's private wing would remain locked. Hello there, I whispered, carefully sitting up so as not to dislodge the pup. Luna yipped softly, tail wagging as she pawed at my blanket. I'm guessing you want breakfast. In the 3 days since the council meeting, I'd quickly settled into a routine centered entirely around caring for the Alpha's daughter. Luna required feeding, playtime, training, and companionship, tasks that kept me constantly occupied and, thankfully, too busy to dwell on the precariousness of my position. Each morning, a stern-faced beta wolf named Lydia would deliver a tray with my breakfast and Luna's specially prepared meals. She rarely spoke, but her disapproving glances conveyed her thoughts clearly. A human should not be entrusted with the Alpha's heir. I slipped from bed and pulled on the clothes that had been provided, Simple but well-made garments in earth tones that wouldn't show dirt or fur. As I dressed, Luna darted playfully around my feet, occasionally catching the hem of my pants between her teeth. "Patience, little one," I laughed softly, careful to keep my voice down. Alexander's quarters were just beyond the wall, and while I hadn't seen him since our meeting in his study, I was acutely aware of his presence, a constant pressure at the edges of my consciousness. A sharp knock announced Lydia's arrival with breakfast. When I opened the door, her eyes immediately narrowed at the sight of Luna. "The Alpha's pup should not be unattended in your quarters," she stated flatly, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "I didn't let her in," I explained, gesturing toward the connecting door that remained firmly closed. "She must have found another way." Lydia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Impossible. That door is the only entrance, and it's been locked from the Alpha's side." Luna chose that moment to trot over to the wall beside my bed, nosing at what appeared to be solid wood paneling. To my astonishment, a small section swung inward, a hidden door built perfectly to Luna's size. "Well," I said, unable to suppress a smile at Lydia's shocked expression, "it seems she's resourceful." The beta wolf recovered quickly. "The Alpha must be informed. This is a security concern. Or," I suggested cautiously, "it's simply a pup wanting company. She hasn't been harmed. Quite the opposite. She seems happy." Lydia stared at me as if I'd suggested something scandalous. "It is not your place to determine what the Alpha should know about his daughter." I nodded, accepting the rebuke. "You're right. Please tell him." After she left, I knelt beside Luna, who was happily devouring her breakfast of raw meat cut into manageable pieces. "You're going to get me into trouble, aren't you?" I murmured, gently stroking her soft fur. She looked up, meat juice dripping from her muzzle, with an expression so innocent it made me laugh despite my concerns. I had just finished my own breakfast when the connecting door swung open without warning. Alexander filled the doorway, dressed casually in a dark Henley and jeans that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. His eyes swept the room, landing first on Luna, then on me, and finally on the small hidden door his daughter had discovered. "Good morning," I said, rising quickly from my chair. "I apologize if Luna disturbed you. I didn't know about the hidden entrance until this morning." "That door hasn't been used in decades," he said, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. "It was built for my sister's pup when we were children." Luna abandoned her breakfast to trot over to her father, rubbing against his legs before returning to nudge my hand, as if trying to reconcile her two favorite people. Alexander watched this interaction with narrowed eyes. "She's growing attached to you. Is that a problem?" I asked carefully. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping before the window. Outside, pack members moved about the compound, preparing for their day. "It complicates matters. Because I'm human? Because you're temporary," he corrected, turning to face me. The morning light caught the gold flecks in his green eyes, making them gleam. "Luna needs stability, consistency. When the council reaches its final decision about you, I'll be gone," I finished for him, "either through death or memory erasure." His expression hardened. That was the agreement. I knelt to stroke Luna, who had finished eating and now pressed against my legs. "Has it occurred to you that erasing her from my memory might hurt her as well? She's chosen to trust me for whatever reason." A muscle ticked in Alexander's jaw. "Werewolf pups are resilient, but still capable of feeling abandonment," I countered, emboldened by Luna's presence. "She's already lost her mother." The temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. Alexander's eyes flashed dangerously, a reminder that beneath his controlled exterior lurked a predator. "Do not presume to lecture me about my daughter's needs." I lowered my gaze, instinct warning me I'd pushed too far. "I apologize." After a tense moment, he sighed. "You'll accompany us today." I looked up in surprise. "Us?" "Luna needs to spend time outdoors, learning to track and hunt. I've postponed these lessons since—" He trailed off, but I understood. "Since her mother died. It's time to begin her training, and you want me there?" I couldn't keep the confusion from my voice. "I don't," he admitted bluntly, "but Luna has chosen you as her companion. Her training will progress faster if she's comfortable." He moved toward the door. "Be ready in 30 minutes. Wear the boots by your wardrobe, the terrain is rough." After he left, I sat heavily on the edge of my bed, trying to process this unexpected development. Leaving my quarters meant potentially encountering other pack members, wolves who might not share Alexander's temporary tolerance of my presence. Yet the prospect of fresh air and open space after days of confinement was too tempting to fear. Exactly 30 minutes later, Alexander returned with Orion in tow. The beta wolf carried a small pack which he handed to me without meeting my eyes. "Water, food, and basic supplies," he explained. "The training grounds are an hour's hike from here." I nodded my thanks, slipping the pack over my shoulders. Luna danced excitedly around our feet, clearly understanding that an adventure awaited. We left through a rear entrance, avoiding the busier areas of the compound. The morning air was crisp with autumn's approach, carrying the scents of pine and distant wood smoke. Luna bounded ahead, occasionally circling back as if to ensure we were still following. Alexander set a pace that challenged my human endurance, moving through the forest with the fluid grace of someone born to this environment. Occasionally, his arm would shoot out to steady me when I stumbled on hidden roots or loose stones. Brief, impersonal contacts that nevertheless sent unexpected warmth through my body. "Your grandmother's bracelet," he said after nearly 20 minutes of silence, nodding toward my wrist where the silver links caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. "It's important to you." I touched it reflexively. "She raised me after my parents died. It was her last gift." He seemed to consider this. "She taught you well. Most humans would have broken by now." "Is that a compliment?" I asked, surprised. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "An observation." We crested a ridge, and the forest opened into a small meadow bordered by a crystal-clear stream. Luna immediately raced toward the water, splashing happily along the edge. "This is where young pups learn to track and hunt," Alexander explained, setting down the small pack he'd carried. "Luna should have begun months ago, but—" He didn't finish, but I heard the unspoken words. Without her mother, he hadn't known how to proceed. "What can I do to help?" I asked. He seemed taken aback by the question, as if he'd expected resistance rather than cooperation. "Just watch. Keep her calm if she becomes frustrated. The first lessons are often difficult." For the next hour, I sat on a sun-warmed rock, observing as Alexander patiently demonstrated how to follow a scent trail. He would hide small pieces of meat throughout the meadow, then guide Luna in tracking them down. At first, she was easily distracted, more interested in chasing butterflies than following the training. When her attention wandered to me, Alexander's frustration became palpable. "Perhaps I should move farther away," I suggested during one such distraction. "My scent might be confusing her." He shook his head. "She needs to learn focus despite distractions." But his tone had softened slightly, acknowledging my attempt to help rather than hinder. By midday, Luna had successfully found 3 hidden treats and was visibly tired from the mental exertion. While Alexander set up a small fire to heat water for tea, I found a sunny patch of grass where Luna could rest. She curled against my side, her little body warm and trusting as she drifted into sleep. I didn't realize I was being watched until I looked up to find Alexander standing a few feet away, an unreadable expression on his face. "She never took to her mother like that," he said quietly, sitting down on a nearby log. "Serena tried, but Luna always preferred to sleep alone, even as a newborn." The mention of Luna's mother created an opening I hadn't expected. "What was she like?" I asked gently. "Serena?" For a moment I thought he would ignore the question. Then he stared into the distance, his profile sharp against the backdrop of trees, fierce, intelligent, born to be a leader's mate. He paused. Our union was arranged from childhood, a political alliance between powerful bloodlines. "You didn't choose each other?" I couldn't hide my surprise. A humorless smile crossed his face. "Choice is a luxury rarely afforded to alphas. We serve the pack first, always." "Did you love her?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. His eyes met mine, cold and distant. "Love is a human preoccupation. Pack bonds are deeper, more complex." That wasn't an answer, I observed quietly. "No," he agreed, "it wasn't. He stood abruptly. "We should return before sunset. The forests are not safe after dark, even for werewolves." As I carefully lifted the sleeping Luna into my arms, I realized Alexander had shared more with me in those few minutes than he likely had with anyone in a long time. The revelation left me both honored and troubled. Whatever temporary place I occupied in their lives, it could not last. Yet with each passing day, leaving seemed increasingly painful to contemplate. The return journey passed in comfortable silence, broken only by Luna's occasional sleepy yips as she dreamed in my arms. By the time we reached the compound, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. Pack members stopped their activities to watch our approach, surprise and speculation evident in their expressions. I could almost hear their thoughts: the alpha, the human, and the pup. A strange family unit that defied all pack conventions. Just before we reached the main lodge, Alexander surprised me by taking Luna from my arms, his fingers brushing against mine in the exchange. "You did well today," he said, so quietly that only I could hear. "We'll continue tomorrow." As Orion escorted me back to my quarters, I realized that somehow, impossibly, I'd begun to carve out a place for myself in this dangerous new world. A temporary place, yes, but perhaps not as temporary as I had first believed. The autumn days shortened as weeks passed, each one drawing me deeper into the rhythms of pack life. Luna grew stronger, her training sessions now extending to include basic commands and pack protocols that Alexander insisted she learn, even in her wolf form. What had begun as a reluctant arrangement had evolved into something that felt dangerously like belonging. The Alpha's daughter was no longer the only pack member who acknowledged my presence. Orion had progressed from silent guardian to occasional conversationalist, offering insights into werewolf culture when I asked questions. Even Lydia had softened slightly, her disapproving glares replaced by neutral expressions that occasionally hinted at grudging respect. But the most profound change was in Alexander himself. Our daily training excursions with Luna had fostered a tentative companionship. He still maintained careful distance, rarely touching me even accidentally, yet something in the way he spoke to me had shifted. A subtle warmth beneath his commanding exterior that emerged most clearly when we were away from watchful pack eyes. On this particular morning, I waited by the compound's edge with Luna dancing excitedly around my feet. Alexander was meeting with his council before our planned excursion, leaving me momentarily alone with my thoughts. "The human actually looks comfortable," a voice sneered from behind me, almost like she believes she belongs here. I turned to find the silver-templed wolf I'd noticed at the council meeting, the one whose glances had suggested discontent with Alexander's leadership. Up close, his features were aristocratic but cold, eyes the color of tarnished brass regarding me with undisguised contempt. "Dominic," Orion materialized beside me, his stance protective. "The human is under the Alpha's protection." Dominic's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, we've all noticed his protection." His gaze slid over me appraisingly. "One wonders what special services she provides to earn such favor." My cheeks burned, but I kept my expression neutral, remembering Alexander's repeated advice, never show weakness to a predator. "I care for his daughter," I said evenly. "Nothing more." "For now," Dominic replied silkily, "but the council grows concerned about the Alpha's judgment, keeping a human among us, allowing her access to pack secrets, even pack pups." He shook his head in mock concern. "It suggests a certain weakness." Luna growled softly at my feet, hackles raising as she sensed the tension. "The Alpha approaches," Orion warned, his eyes fixed beyond Dominic's shoulder. The older wolf smiled thinly. "We'll speak again, human. Your position here is more precarious than you realize." He turned and walked away with unhurried confidence, nodding respectfully to Alexander as they passed. "What did he want?" Alexander asked, his expression darkening as he reached us. "Just making conversation," I said lightly, not wanting to create additional tensions. But Luna betrayed my lie, growling again in the direction Dominic had gone. Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Dominic doesn't make conversation, especially with humans. He threatened you." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "He implied the council questions your judgment regarding me." Something dangerous flashed across Alexander's face. Did he now? The words were soft, but I'd spent enough time with him to recognize when the predator lurked close to the surface. What else? I hesitated, reluctant to repeat the insinuation. He suggested there might be inappropriate reasons for your protection. Orion shifted uncomfortably beside me. Alpha, we should delay today's training. The Northern Border Patrol reported unusual scents near the old mill. Alexander seemed barely to hear him, his attention fixed on Dominic's retreating form. Then Luna yipped impatiently, breaking the tense moment. No, he decided, tearing his gaze away. Luna's training continues as scheduled, but we'll take a different path today. He turned to Orion. Double the patrols along the northern line. Report anything unusual immediately. We set off into the forest, but the camaraderie that had characterized our recent excursions was notably absent. Alexander moved with a tightly coiled energy that reminded me forcefully of what he truly was. Not just a leader, but a predator accustomed to eliminating threats. Dominic is challenging you, I said quietly when we were well away from the compound. Using me to do it. Alexander glanced sideways at me, surprise briefly replacing the tension in his expression. You understand pack dynamics better than I expected. I'm observant, I shrugged, and I have nothing to do but watch and learn. We reached a clearing I hadn't seen before, bordered on one side by a steep cliff face with a small waterfall cascading into a crystal pool. Luna immediately splashed toward the water, her earlier training forgotten in the excitement of this new discovery. This place is beautiful, I breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. It was Serena's favorite spot, Alexander said, the first time he'd voluntarily mentioned his late mate since our conversation weeks ago. I haven't been here since. We can go somewhere else, I offered, understanding the painful memories this place might hold. He shook his head. No. Luna should know the places her mother loved. He settled on a fallen log, watching as his daughter playfully pounced at fish in the shallow edges of the pool. You're right about Dominic. He's making a move against me, and you're an easy target. Because I'm human? Because you're different, he corrected. Werewolf society is built on tradition and strength. Anything that deviates from established patterns is seen as weakness. I sat beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. And me being here is a deviation. You being here is unprecedented, he said. No human has lived among the pack for generations. Yet you continue to allow it, I observed carefully. Alexander was silent for a long moment, watching Luna splash happily in the water. She needs you, he finally said. Her wolf has bonded with you in a way I can't explain. To separate you now would harm her development. It was a practical answer, yet something in his tone suggested there was more he wasn't saying. Before I could question him further, Luna bounded up to us, soaking wet and radiating joy. She dropped something at my feet, a smooth river stone, polished by years of flowing water. A gift? I laughed, picking up the stone. It was warm from her mouth, with veins of quartz that caught the sunlight. I placed it carefully in my pocket, touched by the simple offering. Alexander watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. The council meets in 3 days to make their final decision about you. The statement hit like a physical blow, shocking in its suddenness. I'd known this moment would come, yet somehow had let myself forget the temporary nature of my situation. I see, I managed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. And what will you recommend? His jaw tightened. As Alpha, I must consider what's best for the pack. Of course, I said hollowly, understanding what he wouldn't explicitly state. My presence was a liability he could no longer justify. Luna sensed my distress, pressing against my legs with a concerned whine. I stroked her damp fur, fighting back the surge of emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Elena, Alexander began, then stopped as a howl cut through the forest. A warning call that had him instantly on his feet. Stay here, he commanded, his entire demeanor shifting to high alert. What's wrong? Intruders, he bit out, near the compound. He whistled sharply, and Luna immediately ran to his side. Stay hidden, I'll send Orion for you. Alexander, I called as he turned to leave. Be careful. He paused, an emotion I couldn't identify flickering across his face. Then he was gone, disappearing into the trees with Luna at his heels. Alone in the clearing, I struggled with conflicting impulses. My rational mind urged me to follow Alexander's orders and remain hidden, but something deeper, perhaps the same instinct that had prompted me to smile at Luna that first day, whispered that I should return to the compound. Another howl echoed through the forest, closer this time, followed by a sound that chilled my blood, human voices, shouting commands, hunters. In my weeks with the pack, I'd heard stories of humans who tracked werewolves, either for sport or believing them dangerous monsters that needed elimination. Without further hesitation, I set off toward the compound, following the path we'd taken earlier. I moved as quietly as possible, grateful for the lessons in stealth that Orion had reluctantly provided during our daily walks. The forest had become familiar territory over the past weeks, allowing me to navigate more confidently than I could have when first brought to the pack. I reached the edge of the trees overlooking the compound, just as chaos erupted. Armed men in tactical gear moved through the central clearing, firing what appeared to be tranquilizer darts at pack members who tried to intercept them. Several werewolves already lay motionless on the ground, while others had shifted to wolf form, attempting to circle behind the intruders. Alexander stood at the center of the confrontation in human form, Luna hidden safely behind him. His voice carried clearly across the distance, commanding and authoritative. "You are trespassing on private property," he declared, addressing a man who appeared to be the hunter's leader. "Leave now, and we will allow you to retreat unharmed." The leader laughed. "We know what you are, what all of you are." He gestured to his men. "Silver nitrate in the darts. Not enough to kill, but enough to keep you docile for transport." From my hidden vantage point, I could see Dominic and several other council members watching from the sidelines, making no move to assist their alpha. The realization struck with sickening clarity. This was no random hunting party. Someone had guided them here, perhaps even invited them. My hand clutched my grandmother's bracelet, seeking courage in the familiar touch of silver. What could I possibly do against armed hunters? Yet the alternative, watching Alexander and Luna being captured or killed, was unthinkable. Movement to my right caught my attention. Orion crouched in the undergrowth, his expression grim as he assessed the situation. He startled when I touched his arm. "How many?" I whispered. 12 hunters," he replied, too focused on the threat to question my presence. "They've already taken down 5 of our strongest fighters." His eyes flickered to where Dominic stood. "And it seems we have traitors among us." "They're using silver nitrate tranquilizers," I said. "Not lethal doses." Orion's gaze sharpened. "How do you know this?" "I heard their leader. They want to capture, not kill." I hesitated. "I might be able to help." "You?" His disbelief was evident. "You're human." "Exactly," I said, a plan forming rapidly. "They have no reason to see me as a threat. I can create a distraction, give Alexander time to organize a counterattack." Orion shook his head. "The Alpha ordered me to keep you safe." "And what happens to the Alpha if we do nothing?" I challenged. "What happens to Luna?" This struck home. After a moment's hesitation, he growled low in his throat. "What's your plan?" I explained quickly, watching as reluctant admiration replaced skepticism in his eyes. "It might work," he admitted. "But Alexander will have my hide for allowing this." "Blame me," I said, unbuckling my grandmother's bracelet and pressing it into his palm. "For luck," I added, attempting a smile I didn't feel. "Remember, wait for my signal." Before he could object further, I stepped from the trees and walked openly toward the confrontation, hands raised to show I carried no weapons. The hunters immediately swung their weapons toward me, but held their fire when they registered my obviously human appearance. "Stop!" I called out, injecting fear into my voice. "Please don't hurt me, I'm not one of them." The leader signaled his men to hold position as I approached. Alexander's face transformed from strategic calculation to fury when he saw me walking into danger. "Who are you?" the leader demanded, suspicion evident in his stance. "My name is Elena Morgan," I said, allowing my voice to tremble. "They've been keeping me prisoner for weeks. Please, you have to help me get away from these monsters." The hunters exchanged glances, clearly not having expected to find a human captive. Alexander played his part perfectly, his expression shifting to one of cold rage. "The human belongs to us," he snarled, advancing a step toward me. "She has seen too much to be released." The hunter's leader smiled unpleasantly. "Well now, this is interesting. A human witness to your activities would be very valuable." He gestured me closer. "Come here, girl. You're safe now." I moved forward, casting a terrified glance toward Alexander as if afraid he would attack. As I reached the hunter's line, I pretended to stumble, falling against the leader and clutching his arm for balance. In that moment of contact, I slipped my hand into his tactical vest and extracted what I'd spotted from a distance, a signal detonator for the charges his men had been placing around the perimeter. "Thank you," I breathed, straightening and backing away slightly. "You have no idea what these creatures are capable of." "Oh, I think we do," he replied, signaling 2 men to move forward and secure Alexander. As they approached, I pressed the detonator behind my back. The resulting explosions along the forest edge were small, meant to hurt rather than harm, but created exactly the distraction we needed. In the moment of confusion, Orion and the loyal pack members burst from concealment, targeting the hunters with coordinated precision. Alexander moved with blinding speed, disarming the nearest hunter and using his weapon to incapacitate 2 more. Luna darted between legs, tripping and confusing the invaders without exposing herself to danger. I found myself face to face with the leader, his initial surprise transforming into murderous rage as he realized my betrayal. "You little," he began, reaching for his sidearm. Before he could complete the motion, I swung with all my strength, driving my fist into his throat, a vulnerable target Orion had once mentioned during a lesson on self-defense. The man staggered back, choking and gasping, as Alexander appeared behind him, delivering a knockout blow to the base of his skull. Our eyes met over the fallen hunter, an entire conversation passing in that single look: surprise, respect, and something warmer that neither of us was ready to name. "Get to cover," Alexander ordered, though the command lacked its usual sharpness. The battle ended quickly after that, the remaining hunters overwhelmed by coordinated werewolf attacks. As Alexander directed the securing of prisoners, I noticed Dominic attempting to slip away unnoticed. Without thinking, I grabbed a fallen tranquilizer gun and fired. The dart struck him mid-thigh, dropping him instantly. Alexander turned at the sound, his eyebrows rising when he saw Dominic unconscious and me holding the weapon. "He was escaping," I explained, lowering the gun. A slow, predatory smile spread across Alexander's face, the first genuine smile I'd ever seen from him. "Remind me," he said quietly, "never to underestimate you." The pack gathered in the great hall that evening, energy pulsing through the crowd like electricity before a storm. The captive hunters had been secured in underground cells beneath the compound, structures I hadn't known existed until today. Dominic and 3 other council members were similarly detained, awaiting judgment for their betrayal. I sat beside Orion near the front. Luna curled protectively in my lap. My actions during the attack had transformed my status overnight. Where once I'd received suspicious glares, now came nods of acknowledgement, even the occasional murmured "thank you," as pack members passed. "They're calling you Luna's guardian," Orion informed me quietly. "It's an old pack term for someone who proves themselves willing to die protecting a werewolf pup." "I didn't do anything special," I demurred, stroking Luna's soft fur. Orion's expression suggested otherwise. "You walked unarmed into a group of hunters to protect the Alpha's daughter. By pack standards, that's extraordinary." He hesitated. "Especially for a human." Before I could respond, the hall's massive doors swung open, and Alexander entered. He'd changed since the confrontation, now dressed in ceremonial leathers adorned with pack symbols etched in silver. The formal attire emphasized his imposing presence, transforming him from merely intimidating to something ancient and primal. The hall fell instantly silent. "Today, our pack faced betrayal from within and threats from without," he began, his voice resonating through the cavernous space. "Those responsible will face justice according to pack law." His gaze swept the assembly, stern and unyielding. "But first, we acknowledge the courage shown in our defense." He called forward several pack members who had distinguished themselves during the battle, presenting each with a small token, a claw or fang set in silver, symbolizing honor and protection. When all had been recognized, he turned toward where I sat with Luna. "Elena Morgan," he called formally. "Approach the Alpha." Luna whined softly as I lifted her from my lap, reluctant to release me. "It's all right," I whispered, setting her gently beside Orion. "I'll be right back." The walk to the center of the hall felt endless, every eye tracking my movement. Alexander waited, his expression unreadable as I stopped before him and lowered my gaze respectfully, a gesture I'd learned from observing pack interactions. "Look at me," he commanded softly. I raised my eyes to meet his, surprised to find warmth where I'd expected formality. "You entered our world as a prisoner," he stated, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Today you risked your life to protect our pack, to protect my daughter. Such actions cannot go unrecognized." He held out his hand, palm up. In it lay my grandmother's bracelet, polished to a bright gleam. This was returned to me by Orion. Its silver is pure, a metal traditionally harmful to our kind. He took my wrist gently, fastening the bracelet with careful movements. Yet today, it brought protection rather than harm. His fingers lingered on my skin, sending warmth spiraling through me. From this day forward, Elena Morgan holds the title of Luna's guardian, not as prisoner, but as an honored member of our pack. A murmur rippled through the crowd, surprise and approval mingling in equal measure. I stood frozen, unable to process the implications of his declaration. "Alpha," a voice called from the assembly, an elderly female wolf with silver hair and knowing eyes. "The guardian bond requires formal acknowledgement. The ancient rites must be observed." Alexander inclined his head respectfully. "Elder Maeve speaks wisdom, as always." His gaze returned to me, a question in his eyes. "The ritual requires your willing participation, Elena. It would formalize your position within the pack structure." "What does it involve?" I asked, conscious of the hundreds of eyes watching this exchange. "A blood oath," he explained quietly, "binding you to Luna's protection and to the pack. It would grant you certain privileges, but also responsibilities." The unspoken implication hung between us. This was his solution to the council's impending decision about my fate. No longer would I be a human prisoner awaiting judgment, but something new, neither wolf nor outsider, yet formally recognized by pack law. "I accept," I said without hesitation, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. Alexander's expression softened momentarily before returning to ceremonial solemnity. "Prepare the ritual circle," he commanded. Pack members moved with practiced efficiency, forming a large ring in the center of the hall. Luna broke away from Orion, racing to my side with excited yips that drew indulgent smiles from the assembled wolves. Alexander lifted her, speaking quietly in her ear before setting her in the center of the circle. "The guardian ritual hasn't been performed in over a century," Elder Maeve explained, appearing at my elbow. "Not since the great wars between packs." She studied me with sharp eyes. "It creates a bond similar to pack ties, though not as deep. You'll remain human, but connected." "Connected how?" I asked, a flutter of nervousness finally breaking through my certainty. Her weathered hand patted mine. "You'll sense Luna's emotions, her needs. Distance will not break the connection." A knowing smile touched her lips. "And there may be other effects, particularly regarding her father." Before I could question this cryptic statement, Alexander beckoned me forward. I stepped into the circle, kneeling opposite him with Luna between us. "The ritual requires an exchange," he explained, drawing a ceremonial dagger from his belt. The blade gleamed in the firelight, its edge wickedly sharp. "My blood, freely given as alpha and father, yours, freely offered as guardian." He drew the blade across his palm without flinching, then extended the dagger to me, handle first. "Once done, there is no undoing this bond. Are you certain, Elena Morgan?" I thought of the past weeks, of Luna's trust, of daily training sessions in the forest, of Alexander's gradual thawing toward me. of the strange sense of belonging I'd found among these people who should have been my enemies. "I'm certain," I said, taking the dagger. The blade stung as it sliced my palm, blood welling bright red against my skin. Alexander reached across Luna, clasping my wounded hand in his. Our mingled blood dripped onto Luna's silver-gray fur, and she remained perfectly still, her intelligent eyes watching the ritual with uncanny understanding. "Blood to blood," Alexander intoned, his voice deeper than I'd ever heard it. "Life to life. I, Alexander Blackthorne, Alpha of the Northern Territories, bind this human, Elena Morgan, as guardian to my daughter, Luna Blackthorne." "I, Elena Morgan," I repeated after Elder Maeve's whispered prompt, "freely accept the bond of guardian to Luna Blackthorne, pledging my protection and loyalty to her and to the pack that shelters her." A strange sensation spread from our joined hands, warmth that became heat, then something more, something that raced along my veins and settled in my chest like liquid light. Luna yipped once, her small body shuddering as the bond took hold. When Alexander finally released my hand, I gasped at the intensity of new sensations flooding through me. Luna's presence blazed in my awareness. Not thoughts exactly, but emotions, instincts. A constant awareness of her location and well-being that hummed beneath my consciousness. "It's done," Elder Maeve announced to the assembly. "The guardian bond is formed and accepted." The pack responded with a chorus of howls that raised goosebumps along my arms. Not in fear, but in a strange resonance that seemed to vibrate with the new presence in my mind. Luna jumped into my arms, her joy pulsing through our connection with such intensity that tears sprang to my eyes. "The ritual has taken strongly," Elder Maeve observed with evident surprise. "The strongest guardian bond I've witnessed in my lifetime." Alexander watched us with an expression I couldn't interpret, relief mixed with something deeper, more complex. "The Council's judgment regarding Elena Morgan is now rendered moot," he announced to the assembly. "Pack law is clear. A recognized guardian cannot be exiled or executed while their charge lives." The formalities concluded, the gathering transitioned to celebration. Tables were filled with food and drink. Music began from somewhere near the rear of the hall, and the solemn ceremony gave way to festive relief, both for the pack's victory over their attackers and for the unexpected resolution of my precarious status. I found myself surrounded by pack members eager to introduce themselves properly for the first time, many expressing gratitude or curiosity about the human who had earned the guardian title. Luna remained glued to my side, occasionally nudging away wolves who stayed too long, her possessiveness coming through our new bond with amusing clarity. Several hours into the celebration, I slipped away to a quiet alcove, momentarily overwhelmed by the constant social interaction. I leaned against the cool stone wall, eyes closed, trying to acclimate to the strange dual awareness of my own thoughts and Luna's emotions pulsing in the background. "It can be disorienting at first." Alexander's voice came softly from beside me. I hadn't heard him approach, a testament to either his stealth or my distraction. "That's an understatement," I managed to smile, opening my eyes to find him studying me with unusual intensity. "I can feel her constantly, like a warm presence just behind my heart." He nodded. "The bond will settle with time. You'll learn to filter the sensations, to distinguish emergency from everyday emotions. And if I can't, you will," he said with quiet certainty. "The ritual wouldn't have taken so strongly if you weren't capable of managing it." I touched my bandaged palm, remembering the jolt of connection when our blood had mingled. "Thank you," I said, "for finding a way for me to stay." Something flickered in his eyes, a vulnerability quickly masked. "It serves Luna's needs," he stated, falling back on practicality. "Of course," I agreed, though I sensed there was more he wasn't saying. The bond with Luna seemed to have heightened my awareness of Alexander as well, though in a different, less definable way. "And the traitors? What happens to them?" His expression hardened. "Dominic and the others face the Alpha's justice tomorrow. The hunters will be dealt with separately." "They wanted to expose you," I said, "to prove werewolves exist." "Yes," he confirmed grimly. "They're part of a fringe group that's hunted our kind for generations. Usually they operate with more subtlety." Dominic's involvement gave them unprecedented access. Why would he betray the pack? Alexander's jaw tightened. Power. He believed my leadership had grown weak, that my concern for Luna had compromised my judgment. A humorless smile touched his lips. Your presence merely gave him the excuse he needed to move against me. Luna's emotions suddenly shifted in my awareness. A spike of distress that had me straightening instantly. Something's wrong, I said, already moving toward the main hall. Alexander matched my pace, his expression alert. You sense it through the bond? Yes. She's afraid. I pushed through the crowd, following the invisible tether that led to Luna. We found her cornered by 3 young wolf pups who were taunting her, their postures aggressive despite their small size. Halfling? One sneered, using a term I'd never heard before. Not even a real wolf. Can't even shift yet. Luna cowered against the wall, her tiny body trembling with emotions that crashed through our bond. Fear, shame, confusion. Without conscious thought, I dropped to my knees beside her, gathering her against my chest. What did you call her? I demanded, fixing the young wolves with a hard stare. They backed up, clearly startled by my intervention. Nothing, the boldest muttered, though his defiant expression suggested otherwise. Alexander appeared behind me, his authority radiating like physical heat. Answer her question, he commanded, voice deadly quiet. The young pups flattened themselves to the floor, submission instinctive in the face of alpha displeasure. Halfling, one whispered. That's what our parents call her, because she can't shift yet, even though she's old enough. I felt Luna burrow deeper against me, her shame pulsing through our bond with painful intensity. Alexander knelt beside us, his hand gentle on his daughter's back. Who told you Luna should already be able to shift? He asked, careful to keep accusation from his tone. Everyone knows, another pup replied. Wolf pups start shifting at 4 months. Luna's almost 7 months and still can't do it. I looked to Alexander, questioning. He sighed, dismissing the young wolves with a gesture that sent them scampering away. Is it true? I asked quietly, stroking Luna's trembling form. Is she delayed in her development? Yes, he admitted, the single word heavy with worry I'd never heard him express before. Werewolf pups typically begin transitioning between forms by her age. Luna shows no signs of the ability. Because of her mother's death? I guessed. His expression tightened. That's what I believed at first. Trauma can delay development, but now... He shook his head. I've consulted every healer in the territory. None have answers. Luna whimpered softly, and I felt her distress ease slightly as I continued petting her. Through our new bond, I sensed not just her emotions, but a deeper current. Something blocked, restricted, like energy trying to flow through a channel too narrow to contain it. I can feel it, I said suddenly, trying to articulate the sensation. Something's stuck, like she's trying to change but can't break through a barrier. Alexander's head snapped up, his eyes intense. You can sense this through the guardian bond? I nodded, struggling to describe the impression. It's like water building behind a dam. The pressure keeps increasing, but there's no release. For the first time since I'd known him, hope plainly showed on Alexander's face. The guardian bond might be the key we've been missing, he said, his hand unconsciously moving to cover mine where it rested on Luna. If you can sense the blockage, perhaps you can help remove it. Luna looked up at me, her small face showing complete trust that made my heart constrict painfully. Whatever we had started with the ritual, it now extended far beyond a simple protection pledge. I had become integral to this small wolf's future, and by extension, to her father's. I'll try, I promised them both. Whatever it takes. Winter settled over the mountains with pristine authority, transforming the pack's territory into a landscape of breathtaking beauty and silent challenge. Snow blanketed the forest paths where Luna and I had once trained daily, now limiting our excursions to brief ventures on all but the mildest days. The pack compound turned inward during these cold months, focused on communal activities, training, and strengthening bonds that would carry them through until spring's renewal. 3 months had passed since the guardian ritual, and my integration into pack life had progressed with surprising smoothness. The title of guardian afforded me a clearly defined role within the social hierarchy. Not quite pack, but no longer other. I attended council meetings, provided a human perspective on pack matters, and most importantly, devoted myself to helping Luna overcome the mysterious blockage that prevented her shifting. We worked daily in a private chamber Alexander had converted for our use, its walls lined with ancient texts on werewolf development and specially crafted tools designed to stimulate Luna's dormant abilities. Progress came in tiny increments, moments when I sensed the dam of energy shift slightly, allowing a trickle of transformation to flow before solidifying again. Each small victory fueled our determination, even as winter's isolation intensified the urgency of our efforts. I felt it that time, I said excitedly, kneeling beside Luna as she shook herself after another attempt. Through our bond, I had sensed the closest approach yet to breakthrough, a momentary shimmer of change that affected the tips of her ears and paws before receding. "You're getting closer, little one." Alexander watched from the doorway, where he had observed our daily sessions with careful attention. Over the months, his formal reserve had gradually softened into something warmer, more personal. Our shared concern for Luna had formed a bridge between us, one that grew stronger with each passing day. "Tomorrow is the winter solstice," he remarked, crossing the room to join us. "The elders believe it might provide an opportunity." I looked up questioningly, because of the increased lunar energy. He nodded, clearly pleased by my growing knowledge of pack lore. "The longest night has traditionally been when difficult first shifts occur. The pull between wolf and human forms is strongest when darkness dominates." Luna yipped enthusiastically, her emotions flowing through our bond with bright anticipation. She understood far more than her form suggested. A fully developed intelligence trapped in a body that refused to transform. "Then we should prepare," I said, rising from the floor. "What does the ritual involve?" Alexander's expression grew solemn. "It's not without risk, Elena. The elders propose using the guardian bond to guide Luna through the transformation. Essentially, you would serve as an anchor for her consciousness while her body makes the transition." "That sounds straightforward enough," I observed, though his grave tone suggested complications he hadn't yet voiced. "The danger lies in the depth of connection required," he explained carefully. "You would need to open yourself completely to the bond, far beyond what you've experienced thus far. There's a possibility," he hesitated, clearly struggling with the implications, "that your mind could become lost in hers if the transition fails." The gravity of the risk settled over me, but only briefly. After 3 months of sensing Luna's frustration and Alexander's worry, the choice seemed clear. "I'll do it," I said without hesitation. "She deserves the chance to become who she truly is." Alexander's gaze held mine, searching for doubt or fear and finding only resolve. "Your courage continues to astonish me," he said quietly. Luna pressed against my legs, her gratitude flowing through our bond with such intensity that tears pricked behind my eyes. I knelt to embrace her, whispering promises that tomorrow would bring the breakthrough we had worked toward for so long. That evening, as snowflakes drifted past my window like tiny stars descending from the heavens, a soft knock interrupted my preparation for the coming ritual. I opened the door to find Alexander standing outside, his imposing frame somehow vulnerable in the dim light of the corridor. "May I come in?" he asked, a formality he rarely observed these days. I stepped aside, curious about this unexpected visit. He entered slowly, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on me with unusual intensity. "Elena," he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words, a condition I'd never witnessed in the typically decisive alpha. "Is something wrong?" I prompted gently. "Has something changed about tomorrow's ritual?" He shook his head. "No. Everything is prepared. The elders have gathered the necessary elements, and the sacred circle has been drawn in the great hall." He moved to the window, watching the falling snow with apparent fascination. "I came because there are things you should know before tomorrow, things I should have told you long before now." My heart quickened. "About Luna's condition? About everything," he said, turning to face me. The firelight caught the gold flecks in his green eyes, making them glow with preternatural light. "About Serena, about Luna's birth, about why you were brought into our lives." I sat on the edge of my bed, preparing myself for revelations that clearly troubled him deeply. "I'm listening." Alexander drew a deep breath. "Serena and I were bonded by arrangement, as I told you. What I didn't explain was that our union was meant to unite two powerful bloodlines, creating offspring of unprecedented strength." His expression darkened with remembered pain. But Serena carried a secret genetic trait, one that emerges only rarely in our kind. Her ancestors had once mixed with humans, diluting the purity of transformation genes. And Luna inherited this trait, I realized aloud. He nodded grimly. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Serena's body rejected the developing pup, treating it as something foreign. The healers struggled to maintain the balance, but with each passing month, Serena weakened while Luna grew stronger. "She sacrificed herself," I whispered, understanding blooming with painful clarity. "She chose Luna's life over her own," Alexander confirmed, grief momentarily visible before he mastered it, but her final act was unexpected. As she lay dying, she made me promise to find the one with human blood who could bridge the gap. He met my gaze directly. I believed it was delirium, the rambling of a fading mind. Then Luna refused every caretaker, growing weaker by the day, unable to begin the transformation process necessary for her development. So when I was found near your territory, it seemed like fate, he finished. A human with unusual comfort around wolves, appearing exactly when Luna needed you most. When she approached you in the council hall, when she tugged at your sleeve and you smiled instead of recoiling, he shook his head in remembered wonder. I knew you were the one Serena had foreseen. I absorbed this revelation, connecting pieces that had never quite aligned before. That's why you created the guardian ritual for me. Not just to protect my status in the pack, but because you believed I could help Luna transform. Yes, he acknowledged, though I didn't anticipate how deeply the bond would form, or how, he paused, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. How essential you would become to both of us. The admission hung in the air between us, charged with meanings neither of us had dared voice until now. I rose slowly from the bed, drawn toward him by something beyond conscious thought. Alexander, I said softly, are you trying to tell me that the ritual tomorrow endangers more than just Luna and me? He closed the distance between us, his hand rising to gently trace the curve of my cheek. The elders believe that the winter solstice ritual will permanently intertwine your life force with Luna's, and by extension, with mine. If successful, you would no longer be merely guardian, but pack in the deepest sense. His fingers trembled slightly against my skin. Your life would be bound to ours for as long as you live, and if I want that, I whispered, leaning into his touch. If I found my home here, with Luna, with you? The careful control he maintained fractured visibly. Then you would make me the happiest wolf alive, he murmured, his forehead coming to rest against mine. But I couldn't ask it of you without full disclosure, without giving you the chance to walk away before the bonds become unbreakable. I smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought me to this moment, from terrified captive to respected guardian, from isolated researcher to essential member of a community unlike any I'd imagined. I stopped wanting to walk away months ago, I admitted. Perhaps from the moment a certain pup bit my sleeve and I tugged back. His arms encircled me, tentative at first, then with gathering certainty as I melted against him. Tomorrow we face the final challenge, he murmured against my hair. But whatever happens, Elena, know that you've already saved us both in ways you cannot imagine. As the longest night of the year approached, I stood in the sacred circle with Luna between Alexander and me, our hands joined above his daughter's small form. The pack gathered around us, their voices raised in an ancient chant that resonated through the great hall like a living heartbeat. Elder Maeve directed the ritual, her aged hands sprinkling sacred herbs that sparkled with hidden energy in the firelight. Open yourself to the bond, she instructed me. Feel Luna's essence and guide it toward transformation. I closed my eyes, letting the barriers between us dissolve completely. Luna's consciousness flowed into mine like a silver stream, bringing with it the wild beauty of forests seen through wolf eyes. the complex tapestry of pack connections, and the desperate yearning to become whole. There, at the center of her being, I found the blockage, a knot of fear and doubt, human emotions inherited from her mother's bloodline that conflicted with her wolf nature. With gentle persistence, I surrounded that knot with acceptance and love, offering the bridge her mother had foreseen, a pathway between human and wolf that honored both equally. "I see you, Luna," I whispered, both aloud and through our bond, "all of you. Wolf and human, strength and vulnerability, transform not by rejecting either part, but by embracing both." Beneath our joined hands, Luna's small body began to shimmer with silver light. The pack's chanting intensified, and Alexander's grip tightened on mine as energy surged through our connected circle. For one breathless moment, Luna seemed to exist in two forms simultaneously, wolf pup and human child overlapping in impossible harmony. Then, with a flash of brilliant light that momentarily blinded everyone in the hall, the transformation completed. Where the wolf pup had stood, a beautiful silver-haired child of about 4 years knelt, her green-gold eyes, so like her father's, blinking up at us in wonder. "Papa." She spoke her first human word, reaching up to Alexander with perfect confidence. "Elena." Her small hand found mine, completing the circle once more. Alexander gathered his daughter into his arms, joy and pride radiating from him like physical heat. Over Luna's head, his eyes met mine with a promise that transcended words, a future together, a family forged through challenge and triumph, a love as transformative as the miracle we had just witnessed. As the pack erupted in celebratory howls, I smiled, remembering the silent hall from months ago when a small wolf pup had bitten my sleeve. Sometimes, I reflected, the greatest journeys begin with the smallest tugs,